I want to tell you how I became a Democrat. I began, surprise, surprise, as a Republican. That's right. When I was 15, two things happened. I became a devout Christian. I've been a Christian all my life, but I really felt the burning of God on my heart, and I felt his call. The second thing was I got involved in politics. A lot of my friends were talking about the upcoming presidential election, and this certain Republican was running for re-election. And I thought instead of just talk, I'd get involved. So I went down to the headquarters, and I lived in Reno at the time, going to high school. And as you know, people move in, move out of Reno. It's a kind of a transient type of city where people move in and out quite frequently. My grandparents had moved in. And what the Republicans had me doing was calling people up on the phone, and they said they wanted to be registered. They weren't, that we would send somebody out to get them registered. And they told me in the office, we don't care if they're a Democrat or Republican, we will register them. And I thought, hey, that's pretty good, pretty open-minded. They're just going to help their fellow citizens be registered to vote. And that impressed me quite a lot. Well, I called up my grandparents and said, you guys voted in every election, right? They said, yep, but we need to register. I said, tell you what, I can send someone out to your house and they'll register you, and you don't have to even go do it yourself. No, that's great. And so I set it up. Guess what? They never showed up. Why? Well, my grandparents were Democrats, but they said it didn't matter. And I kept asking, and Grandpa said, no, they hadn't come in. And I asked in the office, they said, don't worry, they'll get there. They're back. They got a lot of people to get to. Finally, I'm over to my grandparents, and my grandfather says in disappointment, I guess this is the first time in my life I will not be able to vote. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, yesterday was a deadline to register. I didn't know anything about a deadline. I was a 15-year-old kid. And of course, I guess Nevada's deadline was different from California in that, because that's where we moved from. And so I go back to the headquarters and I said, they never got there to register my grandparents. And you said you'd register them whether they were Democrats or not. And the lady, her story changed at that point. And she said, well, we don't register Democrats. And I said, but you said you would. And she said, well, you got to understand something, son. You know, the state of Nevada at that time was a safe state for the president. He was going to take it. But they said in the down ballots, like senators, mayors, governors, that was a whole different ballgame. And they said those Democrats who are going to vote for the president, they're not going to vote for a straight ticket, and they'll vote Democrat down the road. And that's where we're hurting. So we do better off we keep those Democrats off of the voting rolls. I said, but you promised and said you would register them, and I promised people that you would, because that's what you told me. Well, sorry, kid, that's just how things go. You just got to get used to the ways of politics. Well, you know what's more important to me than politics? My Christian faith. And according to my beliefs, well, lying is one of the big things we're told by God not to do. And what's more, and I began to then examine the two different political parties. Do not imagine that I'm saying the Democratic Party is somehow right on sync, that it is wholly impure. There are some people in there that are not very nice people, same as in the Republican Party. But the Democratic Party works to feed the hungry, house the homeless, to welcome the immigrant, to bring medical needs to those in need. The Republican Party wants to take those things away. If you read Matthew 25, chapter 25, verses 31 through 46, Jesus said, if you do not feed the hungry, give drink to those who are thirsty, welcome the stranger, a biblical term for immigrant. He doesn't say, oh, they jump through this hoop to make it legal. You have to welcome them, plain and simple. No of this bullcrap that they put forth. And he said all these things. And I said, you know what? The Republican Party doesn't do that, but the Democratic Party tries. And that's how come I became a Democrat, because they were closer to my Christian values than the Republican Party is. And that is why I am a lifelong Democrat. Thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, Jesus was, is, and always will be a liberal. Have a good day.